I'm going to name some of my biggest musical influences in this chapter, explaining some of how I was impacted. These people, their music, and skill set influenced me. Also, I will detail some specific music experiences that were vital in shaping me as an artist-musician. While countless persons, albums, songs, engagements, etc. made a difference for me, I will cite some specific big ones. Of my older three brothers, one of them had the entire Beatle album catalog. As a boy, I would sit outside his bedroom door and listen when he played those albums. I was not allowed in the room, usually. As I got a year or two older, I would ask him to play certain ones. I have a distinct memory of one of his friends sleeping over on Saturday nights, then Friday nights, that is, then Saturdays would be filled with those records coming out of his room. They would be hanging out in his room talking, and the Beatles' music would penetrate their voices and the closed door. I was 5 or 6, maybe 7 years old. That is when I first recall the sound of the A Hard Day's Night album making it to my young ears. The mesmerizing vocal harmonies of If I Fell. The driving harmonica of I Should Have Known Better. Those things were ear candy upon hearing for the first time. There was no acquired taste of a process. It hit home at once. One of those Saturdays brought out the Rubber Soul album. It was pure magic. Even at the age of a little boy, a child with no music instrument skills, I could detect a sophistication in the sound of that album over the earlier one. I did not know the word sophistication yet, but that is what I noticed. The one called the White Album, though the real name of it is The Beatles, was so intoxicating that it became a life ambition to have it for myself. That way I could listen to it when I wanted to and through no shut door. Our home did not have any hi-fi stereo really. We had some basic cheap record players that were in the rooms of the siblings. At a young age, I would begin saving any money that I could get my hands on for buying Beatle albums. By the time I was about 11 or 12, I had the entire catalog, not relying upon brother anymore. I received the White Album at age 10, nearly 11, and there is a photo of my holding it up, beaming with excitement. There is Christmas wrapping paper all around me. This one was a holiday gift from my parents. Many of them came as birthday or Christmas gifts or from money I had from selling blackberries or washing family cars, etc. I indulged in that music with an interest that suggested it was changing my life. A life-changing effect that would say lead to my going into music for a career. I seem to be the only one who really noticed that seriousness. However, by age 15 or so, the decision was out of my hands. There was no turning back. I would make music my livelihood. The Beatles would impact that more than anything or anyone, with one rival. My family was notably musical. My father had a working bar band. He played a lot of different instruments to varying degrees. All 4 of my siblings played multiple instruments. Most of them sang. My father's dad, siblings, nieces, and nephews played instruments too. The background through my father was strong in country music. I was around it all the time, including knowledge about the artists. Our home would have country music TV programs on while Dad got ready for his Saturday night bar gig. I would take those in and see Ernest Tubb and Bill Monroe. The 70s era hitmakers would be on them too, Ronnie Milsap, Tammy Wynette, etc., demonstrating their musicality. I absorbed it all and had usually watched American Bandstand and Soul Train in the earlier day. Those shows presented pop acts. As I got into my teens and stayed awake long enough, I caught Midnight Special or Don Kirshner's rock concert. That is where I would see and hear rock artists. With a spinet piano in our home, which I started playing at age 9, and guitars, fiddles, and amplifiers, there was a strong musical environment. I cannot attempt to report how tremendous that overall atmosphere was for a wide-eyed kid who loved the music as soon as he heard it. Other homes I went into never had so much in the arena of music equipment and or conversation. That had to be immeasurable in shaping me into the musician and artist I am. I first heard Proud Mary from a 45 RPM record that was in our home. I do not know who owned it, but a sibling had brought it into the house. The sound of John Fogerty's voice caught my attention. It was gritty-like, and he sang the song with a sense of purpose. It seemed like to my young boy ears, he had something important to say in the lyrics. The whole trip it sent me on while listening to that performance was mystical. I was not sure at first about the specificity. Help me with that word, everybody. The specificity of the storyline. I just knew that it made references to something that seemed not far away. As a Southerner, it seemed like it was Southern in its nature. To my amazement, I would find later that the band Creedence Clearwater Revival came from Northern California. Fogerty was the lead guitarist, singer, and wrote most of their recorded songs. Only the Beatles would trump my interest in this band. CCR became my number 2 favorite band. John Fogerty would serve as a specific influence on me that had no rival, except for one guy. Paul McCartney's imprint on me is not able to be measured. I have not met him at this time of writing, yet his songwriting, vocals, musicality, it all floored me. In the post-Beatles era, I followed what all 4 of those members did. However, none to the extent of how much I followed McCartney. While being intoxicated on Beatles albums and reading about them, I did the same toward him as an individual artist. As a multi-instrumentalist, a songwriter, and a singer of many types of music, I patterned after Macca more than anyone, Fogerty being second to him. I have studied and learned from McCartney's solo works to an extent that I have never encountered from anyone else. I know there are others like me, though I have not found them. When I start talking about his albums and intricate details of the tracks, I lose the person I am in conversation with. They start off talking as though they know his work, then find they did not really follow him much. Gene Stewart was my uncle. He spent a long period of years in bar bands around Nashville. Oftentimes, the players on the low-tier gigs he played weekly were not to his standard. He had a unique skill set on electric guitar. Well-versed in Chet Atkins and Merle Travis guitar chops, he could fill a room up with his spectacular playing. On a Fender Telecaster played through a Fender Bassman amplifier, he was masterful at playing double stops and also emulating a steel guitar. Double stops are two notes played in harmony, usually in a lead solo or as fills between a singer's lines. As a hybrid player, where you use a pick and bare fingers combination, he was the best at what he did over anyone else I ever heard. He could wrap his pinky finger around the volume knob of his telly and swell the volume as he slurred his double stops. It sounded just like a steel guitar. He was also a walking encyclopedia of country music. He was a walking encyclopedia of country music and had played thousands of songs over the years. I took some guitar lessons from him at his home when I was about 15 years old. I chose to become a hybrid player thanks to his expertise. The guitar prowess I have is due to his influence more than any other player, with only one rival. Warren Haynes played in my bar band for some 60 to 75 gigs in the mid-80s. I did a few gigs with him in his band, in his bar band too. Also, I am proud to say that we would give out each other's phone numbers for people needing a Nashville player/singer during those years. 5 years my senior and superior to me in his blues rock skills, I would opt to not be power trio at times just to have him on the gig. My band would be a foursome and I would make a little less money but learn a tremendous amount of info from playing alongside Warren. During the 4-hour bar gigs, I could study his amp settings, learn his licks, etc. Even during a 15-minute break, I would ask him questions and pay attention to everything he told me. His vocal skills were as good as his playing too. We talked about vocals a lot because of that. I upgraded my gear to try and keep up with him. That was one of the areas he was ahead of me, and I was fortunate that he was so willing to share his thoughts on what I should change. On weeknights, without a gig, I would go to his place and hang out. I took him with me to play pickup basketball quite a few times too. We would come back to my apartment and talk about music for a while. I learned how to get a better tone from my amp and a few string bending licks. I still think of Warren when I do a step-and-a-half bend on a blues or rock number. I now play slide guitar, though I would not have touched one in his presence in those days. It is his influence that made me eventually play slide. He also smoked me on stage at my gigs, though I am proud that I had the maturity to welcome him in playing and smoking me. It was a learning experience of high value. Only once did I feel I smoked him. I did an instrumental of San Antonio Rose, an influence from my Uncle Gene. I did it all in double stops and was solid. I gave Warren a turn on it, and his single note idea was jazz-like. I thought it was a nice departure from my playing on the song. However, between sets, he apologized to me, saying that he did not know what to do on it. I told him I thought his jazzy, improvised idea was the perfect thing against my sticking close to the melody. Secretly, I felt a small victory. He was the one making me feel second class, usually. I cannot say enough of how much Warren's vocals and guitar work affected me in 1984 through 1986. It was all a direct impact, standing beside him on stage. The tail end of 1980 probably played as much a role in anything in sending me down the path of a music career. I was 15 in my dad's bar band on weekend nights and nearly 16. I was gaining momentum as a musician, a respectable guitarist and pianist, and starting to write songs. My other large passion was being a baseball player. At that point, I could not fathom a life away from baseball or a music stage. I was smitten with both things. On the evening of December 8th, 1980, an event that would change a lot of people in the world would change me. There I was in my parents' house, jumping from piano to guitar while my brother played his bass guitar. We were running through Beatles songs mostly, as we were in two different country bands on weekends and only played together at home. We did not play Beatles songs on the country gigs typically. We were having fun. He was off work from his job and I was out of school because of the evening hours. We decided to take a turn toward John Lennon songs. As I was enamored with McCartney, a little bit more than Lennon, this was becoming a new trend for us. I was discovering Lennon songs more and starting to have a growing interest in his influence on the Beatles' journey. Our conversation between the songs was about Lennon's personality, his being influenced by Dylan at one point, and so on. The jovial hour of running through the Lennon songs came to a screeching halt, and in the strangest of ways. Our older brother called and informed us that Howard Cosell had just announced on Monday Night Football that the ex-Beatle John Lennon was believed to have been shot. We dropped our instruments to go to the TV and find the horrible news being confirmed seconds later. That moment would truly change me. My interest in Lennon, the artist, would skyrocket, as though that was not already true. My absorption into being an artist as a career can possibly be traced to that one moment. All the tools were in place, all the interest was there before. However, this was a moment of clearly, unquestionably, deciding what road I would take in life. Baseball would not be it. The old schoolhouse in Fredonia, Tennessee was a house band setting for my father's band in 1979 through 81. As it was not a nightclub and was a family dance environment, I could attend at age 14 in 79. That was the first time I could go with my dad to his bar band gigs. The atmosphere there was extremely quote-unquote redneck in nature and a virtual nightclub. Booze was allowed if brought there in a brown bag. It could be rough with fights and such. My brother, a keyboardist and singer, was the lead singer. I sat in on his keys and sang 2 songs upon my first time there. That was my first time to play with a full band, and I loved the feeling of the pulsating drums and bass guitar around me. As I turned 15 years old, I became a member of the band, playing guitar and singing some. Piano was still my strongest instrument for about a year. However, the experience of every Friday and Saturday night and a working band brought up my guitar skills. Especially since I saw it as a responsibility to practice and learn on the instrument during the week, I would show up well prepared for the weekend gigs. That venue, that band, my father's choice to place me in his band, all was invaluable. The first full-time touring act I worked in was to serve as lead guitarist for a country singer. I was just fresh from graduating high school and had not plotted my exact next move. My father's band was a weekly income to a degree, with all gigs on weekends. The other members of the band were married with kids and had straight jobs. One day, Daddy walked in from work and gave me a phone number of a country singer he had encountered that day. The artist toured North America full-time doing a bar circuit. He had a 4-piece band, including himself. The only lead instrument was a guitarist, and that fellow had just quit. I called him and set up an audition that afternoon. I took my guitar and amp to his kitchen and played with his acoustic guitar strumming. He saw that I knew most of the material and had a strong presence in electric lead guitar playing. I was hired on the spot and given the itinerary. We would leave out from my native Tennessee and drive to New Mexico in 2 days. All the bandmates were in their 30s except for my being 18. That summer and into fall found me on tour full-time, playing clubs all over the U.S. and Canada too. Later in the winter, I would tour with another artist on the same circuit. The year of 1983 would end with my getting loads of experience as a hard-traveling musician. I would be transformed in vocal skills and guitar skills by virtue of the non-stop performances. The other players were of professional caliber, and it was the first time I was around people who treated music as a full-time endeavor. Not only did we play music every night, but we talked about it all day too. It was not a hobby, it was a job, a career. That year was vital in kicking me into high gear toward the music profession in which I've taken part for decades now. The above-mentioned people and situations were of utmost importance in my music journey. There are countless other influences, though. These stick out as being especially large. The individual artists who I gravitated toward were songwriting, singing, guitarists. Those artists were what I wanted to be more than anything. In McCartney's case, the multi-instrumentalist aspect would be a lure for me. I play piano, guitar, slide, electric, acoustic, 12-string, etc., bass guitar, mandolin, drums, harmonica, even some fiddle. Both John Fogerty and Paul McCartney were known for making albums and playing all instruments. That would be a guide for me. In fact, in 2008, I made an album with my playing all instruments. I did not include a drum kit on that record, but I do play drums and have been the drummer on 20 to 30 live gigs over the years. I have been bass player on 75 gigs. I did a piano vocal weekly happy hour gig for about a year at one time, so I am quite comfortable playing many instruments. My strongest is guitar, no doubt, and that has caused countless folks to quote unquote see me as a guitarist only, not recognizing that I am a vocalist and songwriter too. Among those singer-songwriter guitar influences, some are stronger at writing. Some are strongest as a singer. Some are guitar whiz types. In each case, these artists do all three to some extent and were definite influences on me. John Prine, George Harrison, Bob Dylan, Merle Travis, Neil Young, John Lennon, John Fogerty, Tony Joe White, Paul McCartney, Merle Haggard, Robert Johnson, Steve Earle, Roger McGuinn, Alvin Lee, Willie Nelson, Jimi Hendrix, James Taylor, Randy Bachman, Warren Haynes, Paul Simon, Stacey Earle, Chuck Berry, Buddy Holly, Dickie Betts, Carl Perkins, Hank Williams, Woody Guthrie. There are some I'm leaving out. I seem to have listed only one female, my wife. However, there are lots of female artists that I draw from. None of them who are guitar, writer, singer combination happen to be as high on my list of influences as those above that I mentioned. I have learned a lot from studying Carole King's music, though I need to put her in the piano singer-writer category. I certainly have favorite vocalists who are women. Ann Wilson, Marilyn McCoo, Lee Nash, Tammy Wynette, Mavis Staples, Etta James, Mary Travers. Some big vocal inspirations for me who are male: McCartney, Fogerty, Burton Cummins, David Clayton Thomas, Eric Burdon, Lennon. Influential guitarists who inspired me specifically in the arena of guitar work: Chet Atkins, Johnny Winter, Murray Milson, Carlos Santana, Brian Setzer, Stevie Ray Vaughan, Roy Nichols, Mark Knopfler, Stephen Gaines, Dwayne Allman, Reggie Young, James Burton, Scotty Moore, and some others.